Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamatassa tawara e soravanta bamunchantu satang. So this is the Magha Puja, and this one of the main festival days in the Theravada tradition, when 1,250 arahants assembled spontaneously. All came from different directions to pay respect to the Buddha, in which he gave the Ovada Patimokkha. And so that this is the story behind this celebration. And then the Ovada Patimokkha is, I'll read it to you. So this is what the Buddha would recite, teaching he gave to 1,250 arahants. Let's see if you can understand it. Patience and endurance are supreme practices for burning up evil. All those who have known say that Nibbana is the supreme Dhamma. Those who kill or harm others cannot be called those ordained ones who have become calm. The not doing of all evils, the doing of what is good, the cleansing of one's heart, these are the teachings of all the Buddhas. The not speaking evil, not hurting, being restrained according to the Patimokkha, knowing what is sufficient in taking food, having a secluded place for sleeping and sitting, making efforts to practice in the pure heart, these are the teachings of all the Buddhas. So this is a brief exhortation, which is simple enough teaching: do good, refrain from doing evil, and purify the mind. So, the doing good and refraining from doing evil, this is our sila, like the Patimokkha precepts, 10 precepts, the 8 precepts, all these are conventional forms of agreement to restrain ourselves from acting on in ways that are harmful to ourselves and to others. So it's like respecting life, not intentionally harming, telling the truth, being responsible for your behavior, all these kind of things that we are brought up with, whether you're Buddhist or not. Usually we're advised not to tell lies and be honest, and they have some sense of responsibility for how we behave, not to speak evil or say malicious, unkind things, spread gossip, and so forth. And to purify. And this is, I've always contemplated this sense of purification, because it's part of a religion, not just Buddhism. And so it's a rather high-minded word. To what do we mean by what is pure? What is purity? And so this is like self-inquiry when we're thinking about the pure heart, the unshakable heart, the pure mind. Purity always conveys this, it's unblemished, it's unstained, it's complete and whole. And yet we can think of it in terms of like being, in a personal way. Of can you ever really feel pure as a person? Do you ever really feel that you're pure as a person? I'm asking you the question. Well, tell the truth, I never can feel pure as a person. But through meditation, through investigation, through reflection, through looking into the nature of things, then the purity of this moment is the consciousness, this consciousness that we're all experiencing. It's all pure consciousness. This is a reflection, not a doctrinal statement. And then we project ourselves into consciousness. So then, of course, the self is based on delusion, on ignorance, not understanding the Four Noble Truths, through attachment to conditions, through desire. So this, when we are not awake, not aware, not mindful, then we live our lives through our personalities, through our prejudices, our biases, our cultural attitudes, our assumptions, through our feelings and emotions. So that's why society is the way it is, because most people don't recognize the purity that they always have, but they're always projecting into consciousness this sense of I am this body, I am this person, I am good, bad, right, wrong, lovable, not lovable, beautiful, ugly, and on like this. Then we develop habits of seeing ourselves, projecting ourselves, creating ourselves endlessly through our attachments, to our desires, our memories. And there's no purity in that. We can never feel pure just through being good, or obeying all the rules, or not doing bad. Because even though on the sila level we can find maybe more happiness and a sense of self-respect through doing good and refrain from doing bad, still, if this basic delusion of a self is the underlying condition that we operate from, then after how many lifetimes, 84,000 lifetimes, you're still operating from the same delusion, and the result will always be the same. You'll have to come back again and go through it all over again to eventually get the points. Now the point is very clearly stated in Buddhist teaching of mindfulness, awakened consciousness. When I just gave the refuges, Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. So that means taking refuge in awareness, in truth, and in within this human form, the development, cultivation of this path of awareness. So it's not personal. When you take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, you're transcending your personality, or your cultural identities, or whatever, the conditioned realm. So then with Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, then we reflect from there with mindfulness and wisdom the way things are. So all conditions are impermanent, all Dhamma is not self. So it really resolves itself in very simple teaching of just awakened attention in the present. So simple, and yet we can make it incredibly complicated because we always come from this basic delusion of a self. If you never challenge that sense of self or investigate it, then no matter how good you are, you'll always be deluding yourself in some way, and you'll never be liberated, even with just being good and not doing bad. It's through understanding in this way of Dhamma, seeing the way it is, rather than always be caught in the conditioned route. Good and bad are always about the qualities of conditioned phenomena. When you have phenomena, then you have good, bad, right, wrong, beautiful, ugly, desirable, undesirable, true and false. So notice that this is a dualistic, divisive creation of the mind through thinking, through attachment to the discriminating ability we have through seeing things in terms of their qualities. This is bigger than that. This is better, worse, male or female, right or wrong. Then with all these things, all these various conditions have their own particular emotional reactions. So we have, if it's beautiful, then we like it, we want it. If it's ugly, we don't like it, we want to get rid of it. We have cultural biases, cultural assumptions, racial identities, ethnic biases, religious biases. These are all acquired knowledge that we get after we're born. So we're not born being a man or a woman or a Buddhist or a Christian or a good person or a bad person. These are attitudes, assumptions, perceptions that we acquire after birth. So what was your original face before you were born, as the Zen koan goes? And so this is the awakened consciousness. All of us are experiencing consciousness equally at this moment. That we're all experiencing consciousness through the form of the body. So right now, speaking for myself, consciousness, I'm experiencing consciousness from here. Because the body is a conscious form. And because of that, because of birth into a human body that is conscious, then I have to experience life from this position, from the way this body is, its various qualities of good health or bad health, youth, old age, sickness, and its inevitable death. And wherever it is, like I just came from Thailand, this body last week at this time was on an airplane, probably over Kazakhstan or something. And sitting in first class area of the Thai International Airline, very nice. Drinking orange juice, 30,000 feet above Kazakhstan. So that is experiencing consciousness from there. But that was all sanya or memory, isn't it? Because when you're sitting in an airplane, you have these little like TV screens in front of you where you have the flight path where you can see where your airplane is at this given moment. And so you're looking at this little TV screen and you see this kind of form, of kind of an outline of an airplane as it crosses over, say from Bangkok, crosses over to India and Afghanistan and to Kazakhstan, Russia, and all the way to London. And yet, whether, this is, I just take for granted that this is what's happening, because I didn't manage to get from Bangkok to London. But this can be seen in strictly personal terms and conventional terms, social terms, scientific terms. But all terms are conditions of the mind. That's not the purity of consciousness, it's conditioned. And a condition in this sense is something that is born and dies, begins and ends. So the body, being the main condition we have to live with for a lifetime, it was born and it will die. And so we all know that. That's common knowledge. But we live in a way that we don't really know that. We know that as a perception, but the reality of it doesn't really come to us unless we investigate, because we can live in the realm of ignorance for lifetimes. I don't know how many lifetimes I've been living in the realm of ignorance. And I don't particularly care or worry about it, but this lifetime is the opportunity for awakening. And that's the whole point of this teaching, is awakened awareness, consciousness, knowing for yourself, but not for yourself as a person. This kind of knowing is not like acquired knowledge that you get from reading the scriptures, but it's the knowing that is natural to us, that is non-personal. It's not acquired knowledge, it's recognition, it's understanding. These are the words I find most useful for explaining this. Recognizing, realizing, knowing the real from the unreal, knowing the conditioned and the unconditioned. So this is the emphasis in Buddhist practice, is this discerning wisdom, ability that a human individual has to discern the condition as a condition. So during this winter's retreat, this is the emphasis on this discerning a condition as a condition. Whether it's a personal view, an emotion, whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, true or false, it's coarse, heavy, material, or refined and subtle, it's emotional, whatever its quality might be. Conditions have qualities, so that's what why we think we project qualities onto the sense of a self, a body, the things that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, feel. But then when we cultivate awareness, then this awareness is not something that is not a condition. It's not another condition that knows another condition. One condition doesn't know another condition. But this knowing of conditioned phenomena is the unconditioned. So, this probably baffles most of you when I talk like this, because I'm using a language that is quite incomprehensible to the thinking mind. This you have to discover and recognize for yourself. You try to figure out nibbana and the unconditioned and anatta and emptiness with your thinking mind. What happens? You just get more confused, trying to figure it all out. So that's where this mindfulness is not about thinking or acquiring knowledge from external sources, but awakening. When we contemplate the nature of conditioned phenomena, it's the three characteristics we use: anicca, dukkha, anatta. And this can be very perfunctory, and all the talk about Vipassana and developing of insight and all that. This emphasis on all conditions are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, anicca, dukkha, anatta. But in so much of what passes as Vipassana is not discerning. It's merely projecting these kind of words onto experience. So when you try to think about no self, or when you try to think that all conditions are unsatisfactory or are dukkha or suffering, we end up with some kind of negative feeling. If there's no self, what's the purpose of even practicing? As a person, and if there's no person, then who's practicing? Why take the precepts? Why ordain as a monk or a nun? Why? It doesn't matter whether you do good or bad. Just follow whatever the mood of the moment. It's all conditioned phenomena. So the logic that comes through these trying to think about anicca, dukkha, anatta, or nibbana, or emptiness, usually takes us to a kind of annihilation, or a kind of depression, or a nihilism. And yet something in us longs for something like an ultimate truth, like a belief in an ultimate cause, a creator God, a heavenly Father, eternal happiness. In religion, most religions, there's this reference always to eternal happiness, forever and ever, with our Creator, or with God, or the Holy Spirit. So there's this other side of thinking, of using words in terms of what they call eternalism. So we long for that ultimate truth, that joyous happiness, that wonderful bliss that we can only experience through finding God, or having some kind of mystical experience that we might have heard about, or we might even have experienced at some time. But this is still the dualistic thinking process, and the emphasis on mindfulness can seem rather boring, because what is mindfulness? When you use the word, what is it? And then there's various theories, various definitions. But however they define mindfulness, or sati sampajanya in the Pali dictionaries, or English definitions, that's not it. Consciousness is not something you need to go to the library to study. It's what you're experiencing right now. It's the reality of now. The consciousness is now. Mindfulness then is the recognition of consciousness now, this ability to awaken, to open, to observe, to be the puto, or the knowing, the transcendent knowing of Dhamma, or reality. The transcendent, it's transcending. It doesn't mean it's kind of higher than knowing about Buddhism. It's not about higher or lower, because these are words, and higher and lower are about conditioned phenomena. So when they define Nibbana as the highest happiness, That's not quite right either, is it? It's not. Is it higher than ordinary happiness? And then we get our intellects into a twist trying to figure out Nibbana as some kind of, there's happiness and then there's maybe a higher happiness, and Nibbana is the highest happiness. And then we can think maybe there's a higher happiness than the highest happiness. Where do you go? Where does that ever end? In just the endless proliferation of thinking with terms. So mindfulness is not about thinking. It's not a rejection of thinking, but it's non-attachment. It's a natural non-state of being, if that makes sense. It's not even a state. You can't make yourself mindful. I hear people say, well, I've got to be more mindful. I've got to cultivate mindfulness. That's a conventional way of talking, but it actually is quite misleading. That I'm somebody who's not mindful and must practice more mindfulness in order to become increasingly more mindful. You see what I mean? The way the thinking mind connects, one proliferating thought to another. It goes on and on and on and on. And those of you who practice meditation, get tangled up and confused with your thinking process. Because there's so much information now about Buddhism everywhere, in bookshops, in internet, in websites. There's all kinds of things available now to discuss Buddhism and Dhamma. Endless Dhamma discussions on, what do they call these, blogs or whatever, where you can, communicate all over the planet and find somebody to discuss your views about Buddhism or Dhamma. But the simplicity of it is awakened attention in the moment. Here and now, the timeless. When we talk about time and timelessness, it's the ability to discern time from the timeless. The timeless, that's mindfulness. And time is your own thoughts and emotions. Your body is about time, isn't it? These bodies are born, so they die. So they acquire years, and they get older and older and then die. That's time. So then you inquire, am I really this body? Is this body really what I am? And then culturally, of course, one thinks it is. This is my body. And on a conventional level, everybody would never contest that. You say, of course, we each have our own body, our own space. We talk about my space, my process, my feelings, my desires, my problems, me and mine, endless me and mine, the way we even relate to Buddhist monasticism, always in terms of me and mine, or Buddhism in terms of me and mine. When we think we're Theravadan Buddhists, and then we form I'm a Theravadan Buddhist. I'm not Mahayana Buddhist. This is still thinking, isn't it? And there's still this sense of I am this and I'm not that. Now that which is aware of thinking, now this I encourage to really investigate thinking. Listen to yourself thinking. And I've said this over and over, and sometimes I wonder with some of you whether you actually listen to your thoughts, or you just think and follow your thinking. I really wonder, after years, how you still create yourselves and believe your own creations. After I've been teaching this for many, many years. So I'm scolding you now because I'm fed up, actually, because you're not getting the point. In seeing and listening to one's own thoughts. I can do it, so I assume you can. Maybe you can't. But this, I know what I'm thinking. I know what I'm feeling. There's a knowing beyond the feeling, beyond the thought. So if I'm feeling happy or sad or inspired or depressed or whatever, there's a knowing of it. Because we say, I feel so, I feel cold because we have so much snow, or I feel depressed because I haven't seen the sun, or I feel, and so but we believe these thoughts. We believe the moods of the moment. We're committed to it. We attach, or we try to suppress. Maybe we feel we should be happy, and we should be positive, and all kinds of idealistic things, concepts of how we should be. So we may suppress our fear, or disappointment or depression by trying to put on a good face in order to live a life where we constantly have to try to be something that we're not, or we're trying to always control our emotions or our feelings. And then when we lose control, then we feel guilty or like a failure, or we feel despair, hopeless. But there's also a knowing of this that's beyond the actual emotion, or the actual memory, or the actual thought. Like thoughts can be rather neutral, one can be very objective about certain things, but then emotional experience comes into it. And then the thoughts, certain thoughts, certain tones, a tone of voice, a certain perception, a memory, something will come and we can feel a strong emotion. So this is, to see with the reflection on the 8 worldly Dhammas, that when somebody praises you, what do you feel like? Or when somebody criticizes you, what do you feel like? It's like, this is where we observe. It's not to say we shouldn't feel anything. Praise and blame, praise and criticism, we should just be kind of totally indifferent to the 8 worldly Dhammas, because that's another delusion. Being indifferent to praise, blame, happiness, and suffering. But what we can do is be aware of somebody, of praise, I feel like this, blame, criticism, I feel like this. There's this feeling like this. And that feeling, of course, arises according. If I feel, if somebody praises me, it is not the same feeling that I have when somebody blames me. So it's one is happy and the other is angry usually. So, but there's a knowing of this, knowing happiness and anger, and then seeing it in terms of what it really is. All conditions are impermanent. Praise and blame, and the emotional reaction of being happy or angry is impermanent. There's this continuous ability to know, sustained knowing from this way of awareness, mindfulness, it's clear, it's precise, it's not confused emotions anymore. It's not about how things should or shouldn't be, or what I like or don't like. So you see the simplicity of taking this refuge of Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho. Buddho is knowing, intuitive knowing. It's not knowing about Buddha or about refuges or about Theravada Buddhism or Abhidhamma or scriptures. It's not, that's knowing about. If you read the Tripitaka, then you might know a lot about the suttas or the Abhidhamma or the Vinaya. And so many books are written by people who know all about, who studied and researched the scriptures, but may not have a clue about the Dhamma. And then did Buddha teach Buddhism, or did Buddha teach Dhamma? Did Buddha teach Theravada Buddhism? I don't think that's a reference in the scripture, Theravada Buddhism. And Buddha was pointing to Dhamma, or the way it is, not to Buddhism. So Buddhism is an English translation of Buddha Sasana, and that's the Pali form. But then we see it in terms of Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, Zen Buddhism, modern Buddhism, ancient Buddhism, Indian, Sri Lankan, Thai, Tibetan, and so forth Buddhism. Now these are just conventional ways of speaking, but this is not Dhamma. This is not the way it is. What we can know, what's common to Tibetan Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, is that these are conditions that arise and cease in consciousness. That makes it much more simple, doesn't it, than having to know all about these different, learn Chinese, Tibetan, Sinhala, Thai, to test out all the, what exactly did the Buddha teach. You want a perfect translation, perfect equivalent for every Pali word, have the perfect English equivalent, because we're so attached to words. But the shortcut is to observe the nature of word. A word is a condition. The word Buddha is a condition. But now we're using the word to remember the here and now. Buddha, Puto, here and now. Rather than Buddha, oh yes, he was that sage born 2,552 years ago in India. Then we might know all about the history of Buddhism as it's recorded in Sanskrit or Pali. But when we are cultivating awareness, mindfulness, all conditions are impermanent, sape sankarani Chah. That means everything you think, the whole world around us, everything you hear, smell, taste, touch, every emotion of love and hate, elation and depression, boredom, indifference, however severe, however extreme the emotion is, it's still a condition. And it's knowing the condition as the condition, discerning. It's not judging the condition anymore. It's not getting caught up with criticizing or evaluating or judging the conditions, but discerning a condition is a condition. Now if you pursue this practice determinedly, then eventually it begins to really, it has its profound effect, because you know this from a deeper level than just knowing the theory, Buddhist theories, Buddhist ideas, what Ajahn Sumedho teaches and what Ajahn Chah teaches and all that kind of thing, are all about Theravada and Mahayana and so forth. You know, this is knowing a Buddho, knowing Dhamma the way it is. So, translating the word Dhamma as the truth of the way it is, you want to know, I used to want to know, well, what way is it? And then we've got to believe that all conditions are impermanent. That's what Buddhists do. We believe that all conditions are impermanent. That's not it, is it? We don't believe, because we can observe that. So using sape sankarani cha, all conditions are impermanent, is a reminder not to act and live our lives as if conditions are impermanent. As if conditions are permanent. I am actually Ajahn Sumedho all the time. My feelings, my views, my opinions about life are terribly important. And, I'm living this life in order to become. I'm practicing meditation because I hope that I will become a pure arahant before I die. And on like this, one can be very altruistic, or maybe modest. Maybe in England it isn't appropriate to kind of use hyperbole in a boasting way, like I'm going to become an arahant. And saying, well, I'll try my hardest to be a better person, to be modest, to be humble. So we can grasp the idea of modesty and humility as from the ego level. But when we take the going forth, the bappacha and the upasampada, this is about, the whole aim is to realize the deathless, the reality. Realize the deathless is awakening to reality. Because the deathless doesn't have a beginning or end. If it's death, it means the end of something that began, something that was born. So the deathless can only be recognized, and that is this awareness here and now. Timeless, akalika dhamma, timelessness, here and now. When you think about that, then you're back into time again. You just go around in circles, forming maybe abstract philosophies about the nature of time or timelessness. But can you really imagine timelessness or deathlessness? Can you form an image? Can you create a form that's timeless and deathless? I can't. There's no form, no quality to it. So because the thinking process is limited to that. It's about conditioned phenomena. Thoughts themselves are conditions. But that which is aware of thought is not conditioned. And through awareness, we began to recognize the condition as the condition. Now, I've been pointing to very simple ways to do this, and there's consciousness and space. So we have the earth, fire, water, and air, the four elements, and then we have space and consciousness. Now notice space and consciousness have no boundary, and yet they're here and now. There's space, and it's visually, in that we can look at the space, or consciousness. Now, sound of silence is the reference to this sound of silence that I use, because I've developed this practice around this kind of background vibratory. Is it a sound or vibration? Well, I don't know what it is. They're certainly recognizable, and I'm fully conscious. Consciousness and this sound of silence then go together. For practical purposes, this is not doctrinal statement. So, in this state of awareness, then the earth, fire, water, and air elements can be seen in perspective. All that arises ceases. All conditions are impermanent. Sape sankarani Chah. Whether it's a solid, liquid, air, fire elements, whether it's refined or coarse, subtle, whether it's short or long, or whatever the quality of a condition is. Because once you establish this sense of awareness, it's the sound of silence really helps you to rest in a state long enough to get perspective on the conditions, on your own thoughts and emotions. But to do this, you have to be quite determined to do it, to keep at it till you have this breakthrough. And that doesn't mean just sitting for hours on a zafu. It means like using every situation, whatever you're experiencing now, whether you're happy or sad or whatever your state of mind is, what is it? Just be aware it's like this. It's not saying how you should feel at this time. I can't tell you how you should feel at this moment, but you can certainly be aware of what you're feeling, emotionally experiencing at this very moment. That's awareness. The feeling is the object. So the feeling is sankhara, because it's always changing. You're not going to feel the same. Feelings, emotions are very fleeting. They arise and cease. One can have one can be elated and the next moment depressed. Emotions are like that. Whether somebody's praising you or condemning you, you can be happy or miserable accordingly, just in a moment. But the awareness of being elated or depressed, that's timeless. But we're so influenced, so habituated, so addicted to these extremities, to our feelings, to our sense of our self-importance, our ideals, our principles, that we never get any perspective. We're always operating from views, opinions, biases, prejudices, delusions. So when we think of 1,250 arahants assembling, we can even create this idea of an arahant as being some kind of rare human being. Maybe back in India 2,552 years ago, people were much purer than they are now. I mean, look at our society now. It's how we can become very critical of modern society. Materialism is disgusting, and the political problems of the time, economic problems, the way we've deluded ourselves with our desires for material gain. The banks are failing, economies are crashing. But at Buddhist time, maybe we think of India 2,552 years ago, probably was the golden age. But we don't know, do we? I mean, there are various opinions, but 1,250 arahants assembled on Magha Puja Day. Not because it was part of the Buddhist, Theravada Buddhist tradition, it was spontaneous. Now we can question that, whether that's just legend, myth, history, or reality, or hyperbole. All religions tend towards exaggerating, proclaiming, and all kinds of ways that religious jargon, religious language operates. They all sound like we're the only really good one. Every religion always operates, even the ones that are tolerant say, we're much better than the rest because we're more tolerant. So, these are the function. This is conditioned phenomena, isn't it? What can you do with it? It's stuck in that realm of dualism. Is Theravada Buddhism better than Mahayana Buddhism? Well, to a lot of Theravada Buddhists it is. It's the pure, the original. Then Mahayanas say, no, we're the higher, more advanced. We're Magha, we're not Hina. Hinayana means, kind of minor vehicle, nothing, and Magha means, the great one. So these are dualistic terminologies. Do we have to know which one is the best? On the ego level, maybe that's where we are. We want to, if I'm going to be a Buddhist, I want the best one. I want to have, the higher, the true one, the pure form, the original. And these are just words, concepts that we grasp from the ego level, from the sense of I want the best, or the pure. So when we're cultivating awareness, this cultivating is what bhavana really is. It's reminding ourselves. So mindfulness is like remembering, not remembering like something that happened a year ago or yesterday, but it's remembering here and now, puto, remember, just using the mantra puto as a way of helping yourself to remember, here and now, wake up. Sound of silence, puto. And then resting in that state of recognizing it and worshiping it. Like puto is like this. So it's not just a kind of lazy puto, so what, sound of silence, buzz in your ear, so what, I want to get high, I want to be blissed out of my mind with samadhi, is another desire again, isn't it? Wanting the best, the highest. Not wanting life to be the way it is. Like puto means that we accept whatever is the way it is right now. It doesn't mean it's what we want, or that it's what should be, but it's like this. So physically, it's like this. Emotionally, it's like this. And this awareness then, it sustains itself. I don't create it. It's not something that Ajahn Sumedho is an expert at, being mindful. If I start claiming it on that, in that way, you know I'm off the track. If I start saying I'm more mindful than you are, you know I've lost the plot. I'm not practicing what I'm preaching. But this mindfulness then is not, you can't own it, you can only be this. Being aware, then pure consciousness operates with wisdom and discernment. And this is what the Buddha realized when we talk about the Buddha's enlightenment. This is what Gautama, the ascetic Gautama, recognized, realized, why we call that the Buddha. It's no longer Prince Siddhartha, it's no longer the ascetic Gautama, it's no longer anybody, anything, Ajahn Chah or Buddhadasa or Dalai Lama or anything. It's this. Bhutto, Dhammo, Sangha are the simplified words for reflection, for remembering. So sati, the Pali word sati, is a way of remembering the present moment. It's like reminding yourself, here and now, or using your breath, the anapanasati, if you're trying to develop anapanasati to get some kind of samadhi, or observing, using the breath as a way of bringing your attention to what's happening here and now. It's like this. Or the body, the way it is now. The body's here and now, sitting like this, breathing like this, feeling like this. But these are conditions like breathing, feeling, sitting. But consciousness has no boundary. It's not a condition that has boundaries. It's not a condition. So in Thai, they often use the word citta for consciousness. So in Luang Por Chah used to always say, in Thai they say, watch your citta, do jit. Do is like observe your consciousness. Do jit. This was some of the first Thai I learned was about do jit, or observe your mind, observe your consciousness. Well, you can observe consciousness but you can observe the state of mind you're in. The sad feeling, happy feeling. Because you are consciousness. Consciousness isn't something that you observe, it's something you recognize. So this do jit practice is recognizing consciousness is like this. And then the self, the ego, is like this. It arises, ceases, sense of me as being Ajahn Sumedho arises and ceases, feeling happy or sad or whatever comes and goes according to other conditions. It's just the way it is. All conditions are impermanent. All Dhamma sape Dhamma anatta, not self, anatta. There's no self. Because a self is a condition. In the way that we talk in the Pali Buddhism. Now this is pointing very directly, and it's this is all it amounts to. Not to make problems about life, but to not think that I have to have something in order to something better than what I have now, or I've got to change something because I don't particularly like the way it is. But it's observing that. So in life of a samana, it's we live at a level of four requisites and Dhamma Vinaya. So this is all we need for this practice. This is it. You don't need anything more than this. This is complete. It's a matter. It's up to you to use it. Or if you want to use it for the wrong things, and whether you use it for liberation or for enslavement or for making yourself always discontented or unhappy. So listening to the thinking mind, you learn a lot. It's like listening to, these corny soap operas and that. You can hear yourself complaining, wanting something you don't have, not wanting things to be the way they are, worrying about the future, feeling offended, your feelings hurt, heartbroken, disappointment, betrayed. Longing is another one, longing for something you don't have. Hoping. All these are, can be recognized as conditions arising, ceasing. It's not a put down of conditioned phenomena, it's recognizing, it's discerning it. So conditioned phenomena is the way it is. Some of it's lovely, high-minded, beautiful. Some of it is coarse and ugly, nasty. So most of it is neither one extreme or the other. A lot of our life is just plain boring. Just perfunctory getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth, walking from here to there. Most of our life is just, putting on your robes and taking them off and taking a bath and eating your food, things like this. None of it is, so ordinary that on a retreat we can really get greedy to have a heavenly experience. No, we don't want to spend, 3 months meditating and just end up with just being mindful while we're brushing our teeth. We want to really cultivate samadhi so we can have some kind of super-duper high-minded experience and breakthrough that we conceive before when we don't even know what we're talking about. Or maybe you've had experiences in the past, of great samadhi and great bliss, and then you long for it again. So be careful of that, wanting something because you remember, or wanting something that you don't know yet because you've never experienced it, but you long for it or hope for it. So these are all observable when you observe your thinking process, making it fully conscious. I want something I long for. And this world we live in now is going through it seems to be a very difficult time. And so there's, everywhere, it's not, not just here, but everywhere is so many problems in every way. Because the conditions, phenomena is obviously on a kind of more international scale or global scale, something's happening. So it's even more important to see the liberation that comes through awareness, rather than worrying about the future of the planet or the future of yourself or the Sangha or anything else, but developing that accuracy of discernment so that you find your strength in stability, in stillness, rather than in just being caught in the whirling vortex of changing conditions. Now this is something that is available to us all, as human beings. It's not, if you think you can't do it, then observe that. If you think you're not good enough or not pure enough, observe that. It's not about having to come to a point where I think I'm really pure, then I can find purity. Sometimes those that really think they're pure don't know what purity is. It can be another form of conceit. So I found it much more useful to recognize purity as the true nature of consciousness. And that is recognized through awareness, through sati sampajanya. That's the gate to the deathless, the door or the entrance. That's the only possible entrance that we have in this form as human beings, is through awareness. Because through extremity of conditions, they're very fleeting. They can't sustain themselves. They reach peaks and then you lose them. But this is self-sustaining. It's not me sustaining it anymore. It's recognizing and trusting. It's about surrender. It's about relinquishing, letting go, not about gaining, acquiring. You see, so even sometimes the way the scriptures are interpreted are all about achieving nibbana, attaining enlightenment, attaining stream entry. Just recognize that is not a skillful way for most of us to use those kind of words. Attainment, achievement, successful meditations. Because in my background, that throws me right back into the American mindset. Goal-oriented winner. And then feeling, if I don't get what I want, I'm a failure. So it just feeds the sakkaya ditthi, the ego, all the time. So I found the words like letting go, relinquishing. The samatha life is not an attainment, it's about relinquishing. Letting go, surrendering. And that when you begin to appreciate that way of thinking, surrendering, not from the ego, I've got to surrender, and then it becomes a kind of tyranny. You can make it into an act of tyranny for yourself. But it's like surrendering or letting go or relaxing, putting down the burden of life, putting down, everything, this heavy thing that we carry. The self, the ego is a heavy burden. To be somebody is a burden. To always assert yourself as a separate personality is a heavy, burdensome way to live one's life. But once you see that you don't have to do that, then you let go. You're not trying to eradicate your personality, but you're no longer operating from the delusions of sakkaya ditthi, silabbata paramasa, vicikicca. So that sense of non-attachment, nibbana really means non-attachment to conditioned phenomena. It doesn't mean annihilating samsara. It's not like destroying anything. It's just not attaching. We all have to live our lives to the death of these bodies with these conditions, the way they are. And they don't get better as you get older. You have to learn to live with aging, with with feebleness. My vision isn't very good anymore. I have clean intestines because I did a detox. Probably cleaner than yours. But that's one of my ego hang-ups. But let's think of having to support principles and high standards. How many of you are very idealistic and with high principles and high standards? And how burdensome that is, to be attached to even beautiful high standards and high principles. It doesn't mean that you don't have standards or principles, but it's the attachment, the illusion, the delusion that leads to attachment. And so it's not about, saying all conditions are bad because they're impermanent and suffering. It's not that's a value judgment. It's all conditioned phenomena, all sankharas are bad because they make you suffer. No, some are good and some are beautiful and happy and subtle and all the best. Conditions go from the best to the worst. But ignorance and attachment to those conditions always is this sense of doom, of frustration, of worry, anxiety, fear. All these result from this even attachment to the highest standards and the most high-minded principles. So there's an encouragement to learn to trust this awareness, recognize it. And this is what I've done. I've recognized, spent years cultivating this so it expands, so where it's the ability to sustain this awareness and appreciate it and be grateful and it's for this ability to just rest in this awareness. Where then I can see, all the things that happen to me, my vipaka karma, as I get older, things, people ordain, people disrobe, I get what I want, I don't get what I want, things change for the better, change for the worse. It's all part of it. It doesn't mean that I'm getting out of old age, sickness, death, or I'm just totally indifferent to life, so some monk or nun disrobes, fine, I don't feel anything. It isn't like that. It's not like you become insensitive, but you're no longer a slave to sensitivity. So you're no longer creating suffering around the changing conditions of sickness, disease, old age, loss, separation from the loved, having to be with the unloved, and on like this. This is life. Life is like this. Sokha pariteva tukha tomanasa upayasa. This is not, this is the conditioned realm is a realm where we experience sorrow, grief, despair, anguish, worry. But what we learn from that, we observe that which is observing of grief and sorrow, despair, is not that. And the more you keep reminding yourself, my refuge, the refuge is in Puto, not in despair or in grief. And then to be this observer of grief is like this, you can feel it, It's not something you're indifferent to or rejecting, but recognizing it is what it is. Loss of the loved is like this. Not getting what I want is like this. And then you can observe it as a changing, as for what it is, as a sankhara rather than as my problem. So I offer this for your reflection.